runs it, is on the
Bay and brings us straight in, and just from the get-go we're hooked, and that's your style of writing. Like, you really get us hooked straight away. You got us by the cojones, and you're not letting go until the end. And that's one of the beautiful things I loved about Trouble in Butetown, which is on right now at the Donmar Warehouse, Mondays to Saturdays, until the 25th of March. So I definitely recommend people go watch it,
yeah.
because it's detailed. The characters are so vivid. It's funny as well, and still you're kind of the themes and the kind of central arguments. You present a lot of really fascinating arguments. One of the characters, because it centers. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a quick synopsis, before I geek about it.
Oh, well, so it's just about a GI who is on the run, runs into Tiger Bay, and he ends up hiding out in an air raid shelter where he's found by a little kid who, along with her family, live in the boarding house, because boarding houses were quite common back then because it's a seafaring town. So that eventually he's found by the house, and he kind of ingratiates himself with the house, and they realize that he's got a secret,
Mm.
and it kind of goes from there.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's one of the central arguments you mentioned. I remember the character of Norman, this Jamaican man, and he talks about how the GI really should be focusing on the fascists in his own country, instead of worrying about the fascists outside, which is so connected to just the history of Africans fighting wars for other people, and sometimes them forgetting about the kind of immediate troubles that they have, and also not being appreciated after being part of like a major war. And it was just really interesting to hear that argument, because I think we rarely get a chance for people to discuss that and talk about it. What kind of inspired you to write Trouble in Butetown and set it in Wales?
Well, I mean, it's the history. That's what it kind of was where it started. So I like to often start with the world before I build
Mm.
the story. And Tiger Bay's history is just fascinating. And I fell in love with it. I could have set this play, not the exact play, but I could have set a play in so many different periods of Tiger Bay's history because it's that rich. But I chose the Second World War because one of the things that I love most about Tiger Bay is the culture, the people themselves, the diversity, the inclusion, and not to be romantic about it. They were human beings. They were, people fell out with each other and whatever, but they learned to live side by side with one another, and race wasn't a factor like it was outside of that small town. So I fell in love with that, and I knew that kind of bringing those two worlds of inclusion and segregation together would be quite interesting. But I also knew that it's funny, when I started working on this play about 8 years ago, nobody, or not very many people that I met had heard of Tiger Bay. Now there's a whole load of Tiger Bay stuff coming out, and which I think is really wonderful. And I also feel privileged to, in some way, have been part of helping to tell this wonderful history. I know a lot of Welsh people have done before. I don't want to act like I'm the first, because I'm certainly not. And I'm thinking of really also people like Neil Sinclair, who's no longer with us. He was like a big local historian here, and I think if he was alive today, he'd be really happy to see that people are finally recognizing his community. So yeah, no, I fell in love with it. I just thought, yeah, it was really rich, and I just knew that there were a lot of people who didn't know about it. But even for those who did know about it, they would think this is a part of history that really deserves to be spoken about. Because even when I was researching, I didn't know about the American GIs coming over